There's been a few devices that Apple has made in their whole entire lifetime in which I could have probably pointed to and said, this device could have probably ended Apple and their whole entire ecosystem of what they probably thought of was like probably the best of all time at that point. But honestly, one of the most impactful iPhones of all time, in my opinion, also was the one that probably could have ended Apple sooner than later, which is actually pretty crazy. And that was actually the 6S. For some reason, and some reason I'll tell you throughout this video, essentially what happened was Apple created the 6S, which I thought was a really, really good phone. At that time, it really was kind of underwhelming, to be honest, because visually it looked kind of the same as the previous device. But what ended up happening was that device ended up getting better and better and better. And when we look back at it, some of the highlights of that device were its, doubling of RAM. That device had twice the amount of RAM than its predecessor, which is crazy, a way faster phone, as well as getting way more updates than the previous device before it. So those were some really big highlights of that device over the 6S, over the 6, which I think was a really big deal. And even for so many years, after it ended up lasting as long as its successor, which is actually pretty crazy. But the biggest problem of this device, which could have very well had which it did have a humongous impact and still is talked about every day, is the battery throttling issue that came with this device. So what ended up happening at this moment was that Apple, of all people, were throttling their devices and their batteries at that moment, which that in and of itself was a crazy big deal. The fact that that even happened was insane. Now, Apple, I think, actually had a pretty decent response to this. Essentially what had happened was they went ahead and, for the most part, they had to go ahead and throttle the battery down a little bit because essentially the battery, I guess they didn't, they didn't engineer the hardware that well at that moment. And essentially it just wasn't really lasting that long. And essentially if it hit like 70 or 60%, it would just randomly shut down. But then they realized that they can throttle the performance on the back end and it'll help last that phone a little bit longer, but it would make that phone much slower. Now, I think there's like a Reddit post that somebody said about it, but essentially that one comment, right, in my opinion, caused a humongous storm of all these other things. Apple had to make a press release, and they had to make like a free repair program for the 6S and 6S Plus, and then they had to bring down the batteries, price, like of the repairs down a little bit more. And honestly, that was a really big dent in Apple, and I don't know if they've ever been able to they've been able to fully repair it for sure, but I think that's still kind of in the background for a lot of people. When they look at certain iPhones like the 6S, this is probably one of the biggest impactful things or biggest impactful moments from that device at that moment. So it's pretty crazy, but that's kind of all I have to say about it. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.